Hi, welcome to Integrative Lawyers of the World. I'm your host, Carrie Raleigh. And at Integrative Lawyers of the World, we believe that lawyers can and do contribute to the healing of the world. We believe this because we know lawyers who are doing just this. Our guest this episode is Jamie Lee Tuuta from New Zealand. Jamie Lee is a collaborative lawyer who practices family law and Māori land law. She believes in using her legal skills to lessen social and economic inequality and to improve the quality of life for everyone. I hope you enjoy our episode, and if you'd like to catch this episode and other episodes and to support the integrative law movement, you can go to our website at www.integrativelaw.com. Hi, Jamie Lee. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me here.
Before we go any further, let me ask you, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Just by way of quick introduction, hiuri tēnei no Ngai Tahu, Ngāti Mutunga Wharekauri me Ngāti Toa Rangatira hoki. I whakapapa or have ties to several Māori tribes or iwi within New Zealand, and those are who I identify with when I introduce myself to others. So by way of quick background, my father is of Māori descent. We have whakapapa links to Ngai Tahu, which is in the South Island of New Zealand. We also have whakapapa links to Taranaki and the Chatham Islands, and also the Wellington region. So that's where I have I mentioned Ngāti Mutunga or Wharekauri, and also Ngāti Toa Rangatira, which are two other iwi in those areas. So that's my background. My mother, though, she is New Zealand European. She has links back to Scotland in particular, and that culture I am immensely proud of as much as my Māori culture, and have been involved and many things in terms of Scottish culture, even in New Zealand as well. I played the bagpipes and did Highland dancing for many years. So I like to acknowledge both sides. And so that's a little bit about my family. I'm based in Ōtautahi, which is Christchurch, New Zealand. I'm a barrister here, which means I am independent. I work for myself. My practice predominantly is in family law, care and protection issues, care of children issues, family violence. I'm also a lawyer for children that's court appointed, so represent children in the family court. I also do some work in Māori land law and have experience also as a lawyer working for one of my iwi that I have whakapapa to, which is Ngai Tahu, as a lawyer there. And I've also worked at the Waitangi Tribunal as an in-house lawyer, and the Waitangi Tribunal is an independent commission of inquiry in Aotearoa, New Zealand, that looks into breaches of Te Tiriti of Waitangi, so the Treaty of Waitangi that we have here, on a range of things, whether that's historical claims, but also contemporary claims around the health and well-being of Māori, and what the Crown or Parliament should do to support that.
That ties in so well with integrative lawyers or integrative law. And one of the core philosophies of it is there are many facets to who we are. There are many facets to our practice. And it's finding a way to integrate all our sides into an authentic, into our authentic selves, you know, and that you can be, all facets are part of you wherever you are and wherever you go, you know. So you have all the different, and I'm apologizing right now because my pronunciation and trying to repeat some of the Māori words that you were saying, I probably will not say them correctly, and I don't remember all of them, but for what I gathered, you have certain Māori culture or ancestry backgrounds within you from different, would it be lineage, different ancestry?
Yep, that's correct.
And so you have that, and then you also have the European ancestry back with you, and I love how you said you value and respect both of them equally. They are both a part of you. Um, can you tell us a little bit? I think some of our listeners may not be as familiar with the Maori ancestry as they are with Scottish ancestry. Can you share a little bit about that?
Um, so I guess my side comes obviously through my father's side, um, and within New Zealand, I guess in a really basic description is that there are areas within New Zealand who have iwi who are what we call mana whenua, or they are the people that are of that place, if that makes sense. So many of the iwi have different tribal areas in which they come from and which they look after. And within that, you have an iwi, or like a tribe, and then within that you have what we call hapu, which are sub-tribes. And then out of those sub-tribes, you then have what we call whānau, our family. So we are in, I guess, groupings that are pulled together and linked through what we call whakapapa, or genealogy. So every tribal area has their own way of doing things, their own history. There's lots of relationships between each iwi, and lots of history between them, whether that's good or not so good, but that's just all part of it. So I guess many of us, probably in my generation, or some of us, depending on marriages and things like that, do have linkages across different iwi in New Zealand. And that, is representative, I guess, at the time and place when those things happened. I'm very proud that I have a lot of I guess, links to other iwi, and each of those, from my perspective, bring different things and come with their own history and knowledge, and the way that people interact with each other. So I guess it's a really, I guess, a general thing.
Like with your Scottish ancestry, clans, how they would have um, clans or groupings of families, and extended families that would live in different areas, and then the different clans would kind of um, I'm sorry, I'm laughing at myself. And so I am part Scottish, but none of this is what I'm talking about. It's coming from knowing my family history. It's coming from watching Braveheart and Outlander, reading the Outlander books, which talk about the family
Yeah.
clans and things like that. So I don't know if I should keep this in here, but that's what it reminded me of. Is
Yeah.
in Scotland they had the clans tied to specific parts of the land, and then you had the different clans kind of related together, which makes me think how um, unifying trend, not trends, unifying concepts between all humanity, regardless of where you grew up. There is a connection to the land and a connection to your, familial connections to almost to the land as well.
Mm, mm. Yeah, and I believe that. I do believe that through all culture there are some um, values and value sets that we all share together.
Your background is in family law and Maori land law, and you come with a collaborative training um, that you use in your practice. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I guess I feel like I haven't had traditional, for want of a better description, career in that sense. So my first job was an in-house lawyer within one of my iwi. So I did a range of things, but what is really consistent in all the work that I've done as a lawyer over the past 10 years um, is the commitment to families and assisting, or whānau, what we would say in Te Reo Māori. So the natural progression of working within an iwi, working in a Māori space, using values of Māori across all things, in my view, linked quite closely with practicing family law. So when I had started my practice, I obviously worked for the iwi, and then I went and worked for a community law movement here in New Zealand. So a not-for-profit based law centre that does pro bono work for essentially communities that would struggle or cannot engage with legal representation, whether that's even with legal aid assistance, which is a scheme that we have in New Zealand, which is, I guess, available for those who financially can't afford to instruct a lawyer and pay them privately. So community law in particular, their drive is to ensure that all people in the community have access to justice.
After law school and after you became a barrister, did you start at a community law center or a community law practice?
That was my second role. So I worked as a lawyer within the iwi space first, and then I moved to community law. The consistency, some people may think that's really odd to go from a more corporate space to a pro bono space.
When you said iwi space, I don't know if I understand what you mean by that.
So that's in terms of one of my tribes that I have links to. So I worked for them.
Okay.
Yeah, as a lawyer.
And that would be more of a corporate practice?
It's a little bit a corporate model, but the purpose of it is to advance, I guess, the interests and the well-being of the people of that tribe.
Okay.
So there is some sort of consistency across there, because that community law, unfortunately, like other countries, New Zealand does rate poorly in terms of statistics with our Indigenous people. So Māori are more likely to be caught in the justice system disproportionately than non-Māori. Unfortunately, our statistics also say that our Māori women, are the most incarcerated Indigenous people of the world.
Really?
And so we have a lot of economic and social disparities and inequities between our Indigenous people and those of non-Indigenous descent. So to move to community law, to me, felt a very similar space, although different work, about serving Māori in particular in our community, or our Indigenous people of our communities, to ensure that they had access to legal assistance or representation.
When you said that Māori women are one of the most marginalized and incarcerated Indigenous peoples throughout the world, why is that?
There is probably a really simple answer in terms of the way in which New Zealand essentially was colonised back when the Europeans came to New Zealand, and what happened post that and continues to happen has really affected the way in which Māori people have been able to survive or thrive. So it is quite common in places where there has been colonisation. I guess the distinctive factor for us here in New Zealand is we have what's called the Treaty of Waitangi, so Te Tiriti of Waitangi, which was signed between Māori and what we refer to now as the Crown, and that was those from the Queen from England. And in that treaty, there's two versions. There's an English written version and there's a Te Reo Māori version. Those versions of the treaty don't succinctly match. What's happened with that is there have been difficulties in terms of the articles and what they've meant, in terms of then how the country is structured, run, what sort of constitutional makeup we have, what sort of justice system we have, what sort of things inform the way in which our country is developed. There has been lots of jurisprudence on this, and one of the things I mentioned at the start of the podcast is I'd spent some time as an in-house lawyer at the Waitangi Tribunal. That is a commission of inquiry that's permanent. It was set up in 1975, and that was to look into breaches of the treaty. So Māori can make claims against the Crown about their failure to deliver in what was promised in the treaty.
But I could just see how that can get complicated if there's two versions of the treaty. Which version can they assert their claim on? When was this treaty? What time period are we talking about?
1840.
Was this intentional by like the two attachés?
One of the things that has happened with the Waitangi Tribunal is that they have developed a set of principles, and they call them treaty principles, with all the evidence and historical evidence and views and analysis that they believe is something that everyone can accept. But I guess the thing is, there are different positions on this, and I think there'll continue to be a lot of different views and the way in which it can be viewed. Sometimes our country goes forward a few steps, and then it's so political that it can go back 2 steps. So you could go forward 3 and back 2. Sometimes you can think you're not making progress, or progress isn't quick enough. And I think for many, that will be a common feeling, particularly for many Māori and many allies that support lifting up Māori in these spaces, that things could happen quickly. But then you have others in the community or in politics or in government or things like that who do not believe in the treaty, or do not believe in what it has meant, or do not have the same levels of belief that they should be held to account for this. So it can be really complex, it can be really disheartening, but then in other spaces it can be really inspiring. So there are good things that do come out, and there is good work that is happening to progress it. And I guess my view and all the work that I've been involved in, and I still feel very much at the start of my career, is that my goal is that every part that I contribute to contributes to moving forward. I may not see in my lifetime what I truly would like to see in New Zealand for everyone, but at least I know, and I do believe that we do keep moving forward, even if it's not at a pace that we would want it to ultimately be.
People think of New Zealand as an idyllic place. I guess, I don't know if this is the right word to say, the levels of discrimination on the indigenous people there, on the Māori. Is there discrimination in how the laws are right now, or is it from like how the system was in place that as they're being applied, like in practice, not so much in law?
There's 2 parts to that. So I guess ultimately though, New Zealand is a beautiful place, Aotearoa is a beautiful place, and we are very lucky and proud of spaces. But with anything, there will always be, I think, an underbelly or issues around discrimination. I would hope in the future, though, that that would become less and less, and I do think that is something, but we are not immune to the issues of the world. We're not immune to the difficulties and struggles that other countries have, where there have been Indigenous people there, and essentially there has been a colonial force come through and dominate how society should look. In my view, and look, I recognise that other people have different views, but my perspective is I think we have systemic issues which contribute to racism, discrimination, and inequities, and that does include the justice system. And then I think at another level we have issues with some legislation and the way in which it has been written. Then we do have some issues, I guess, of those who are interpreting the legislation or are, in that legal space. So we have those levels. However, I think it is important to recognise that some of our legislation, whilst our system hasn't changed, so there is a real piece of work that is underway by many strong leaders and advocates within the community in terms of systemic change, in terms of our constitutional makeup, that hasn't been picked up by the Crown yet. So that whilst that hasn't been touched really, in my view, there are tweaks, I guess, to the legislation that have been done where we do have legislation, and even in the Care of Children Act and the Care and Protection Act in New Zealand, that do reflect tikanga Māori terms. So you must have regard to certain principles about a child needing to be connected to their whānau, their family, their hapu, their sub-tribe, and their iwi, their tribe. So whilst the constitutional makeup hasn't had a reform that would really potentially have the ability to lift up the Treaty of Waitangi and ensure that it's consistent in the approach from a constitutional point of view, it does not mean that there has been able to be progress in legislation, because there has been changes. And in my view, with those changes, it gives us the ability as lawyers to then be able to advocate in advance for our clients.
We are taking a brief break from this conversation to ask for your financial support. With each episode, we hope you can see how lawyers and peacemakers like you are contributing to the healing of the world. It takes many kinds of resources for the integrative law movement to keep going and affecting change. Your monetary donation can help us continue this important work by supporting the activities and the members of this community. Each contribution goes to promote the stability and accessibility of the movement and to support basic expenses like our Mighty Network Group, web hosting, social media and event management, and this Integrative Lawyers of the World podcast. Because we like to give people choices, we have ongoing monthly options to match your budget, or you can make a one-time donation. Thanks to our non-profit corporate sponsor, the Renaissance Law Society, US supporters are able to make tax-deductible donations. Supporters from other countries, please check your local tax laws. For ways to support the integrative law movement and our world-changing work, go to our website at www.integrativelaw.com and click on Support the Movement tab at the top of the page. Another great way to support us is to rate us 5 stars and comment, like, follow or subscribe to us on iTunes, Spotify, Google, YouTube or your favourite podcast platform. These ratings and interactions help us get seen and heard by even more people to make an even stronger impact. Thank you for your support and spending time with us today. Enjoy the rest of this conversation.
The importance of having provisions in constitutions or laws in place so that people can now advocate and how you said, move a couple of steps forward. And that kind of what that reminds me when you were saying how having some legislation in place that you can now have standing or to assert or to advocate on behalf of certain Maori and some of your clients.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, there is a viewpoint where perhaps some of the, legal framework, the English legal framework shouldn't mix with a traditional Māori customary framework. I think in New Zealand, though, we we have already incorporated those things into our law, and it's been recognised in terms of our common law and case law. So pulling back from that, I think, would be more difficult than pushing forward with that. And that's just my personal view. But I mean, those provisions, when I'm doing court work in particular, I lean on those provisions to be able to advance my client's case to get an outcome that would be appropriate for them. Without those provisions, I wouldn't be able to do that. So that is good. I think that is progress. It may be the minimum progress, but at least it opens the door. And then I think it's then up to the lawyers who are advocating to be across that and to be across what they can push and what's appropriate to push in those circumstances. But we do have some tools there to advance, I guess, arguments and positions to ensure that particularly Māori whānau and their children are able to access what they need to, or are recognised in a way that they should be.
Are the Māori represented in positions of power, like in your legislature, community leaders, university doctors, lawyers? Are there, like you, people with Māori ancestry who hold these positions of power, and are there enough of them in these positions of power to be adequately represented, or is that something that still needs to move forward a little bit?
Still needs to move forward, but do recognise that what we have now was better than what was 20 years ago, or even longer than that. There are Māori in Parliament. Whether or not the way in which Parliament's structured is appropriate, we do have Māori seats that Māori can choose to be on a separate electoral roll, but they're a small number in comparison to the overall makeup of Parliament. We do have a growing amount of numbers of Māori who are able to access university, able to make some, I guess, able to have the ability to decide what they want to do in terms of career, because that's a privilege, right? To be able to get through school and have the opportunities available. Many of us, though, are still, in respect to my family, I was the first one to finish what we would call high school or secondary school here in New Zealand, and the first to go to university. And that's very true still to my generation, and it will be very true to many in the future. So, however, I think the whole, I guess, premise of being the first but not the last is really important. And I would hope that, all of those law graduates who come out, after all of us will be incredible and be able to do more things and know more things and have different types of experiences that we have. And I know that will be true to some of our seniors. They have paved the way for us. So I think we will get there. But we don't have enough, I guess, Māori in those sectors, but in a range of sectors in terms of social justice, health, Parliament. But the other thing is, in terms of our population size too, one important thing is to ensure we just have really good allies around us. So it's up to our peers and others who do educate themselves in these things, do understand the inequities. And I, in particular in my practice in Christchurch, I have lots of colleagues who I would call allies, who recognise, where they have gaps of knowledge, and they will go and seek that knowledge out or learn more. They will also support and do what best they can to ensure that they support Māori, and they support Māori within the communities, and they support the Māori clients that they act for, to ensure that they get the appropriate assistance and advocacy that they deserve. So we do need to rely on others, and I'm a big believer on bringing people along the journey with us. So being able to impart knowledge and support others, because I do think it's a two-way thing, in those types of connections and relationships. There are some things that those people give me in terms of my knowledge and in terms of support, and equally I can support them back. And so again, lots of people have different ways and different views about that, but I've been brought up to bring people along with us, and to be open, to also stand up though. If things aren't right, you do stand up, and you need to have the courage to stand up. And sometimes it makes people like you, sometimes it makes people not like you. And one of the things I guess you learn as you get on in your career is it's not about ensuring that people like you or pleasing others. It's ensuring that you do the right thing, and some people will come along the journey with you and some people won't, and that's okay. Sometimes I think at the start you think, oh no, what's wrong? But actually I think if you're true to what you do, you will have good people that surround you.
How can someone be an ally of the Māori? But I think you already went through that in your answer, in that they can, if they have gaps in their knowledge about the Māori people and the Māori ancestry, or the situation facing Māori today in New Zealand, figure out where those gaps are and try to find the information or the knowledge to fill those gaps, and to support the Māori in different areas. And to almost like stand together beside each other.
And I think that's really important. And it's definitely important in the legal world.
What percentage of the population are the Māori?
At the moment, I think we're sitting about 16%.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So I guess the other thing is, recognizing that New Zealand's becoming a multicultural nation, and we are a multicultural nation, and we have lots of cultures who are here in New Zealand. And whilst respecting that, acknowledging the foundations of our country, and obviously our Indigenous people, our Māori people, recognising then the partnership between Māori and European when that happened, and then creating a space for all to belong. I think those who have moved to New Zealand in recent times generally are far more open to understanding and respecting, I guess, the Indigenous history.
Okay.
That might be a bit of too much of a political statement maybe, but I think people are more open, these days to things like that.
Openness may be because on the part of advocates like you, putting the information out there in the public or in other public spaces for people to learn more and to be aware of it more.
This just interesting, probably next 2 weeks' time, we have Matariki. So last year in New Zealand, with the government, with our former Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, her government confirmed that we would now have a public holiday for the Māori New Year. So the Māori New Year, Matariki, is based on a lunar calendar, and it's when we see Matariki, or what other people refer to as Pleiades, in the sky.
Okay.
And that signals the new year for Māori. What that has meant even in the first year, so we had our first celebration of that last year, and we have it in a couple of weeks' time here in New Zealand. What that has meant is there's now just been this openness of knowledge around some of the traditional practices in terms of Māori culture. New Zealand now have a public holiday that everyone does not work on that day to celebrate that day. The schools now have a focus with their whether it's preschool, kindergarten children, primary age children, high school age children who now have resources where they will be learning right as we speak more about Matariki, which that type of leadership cemented yet another traditional Māori practice that may have not been practiced by a large group of people for some time because of various reasons. And it's brought it back. And it's brought it back in such a way where New Zealand has embraced it. And look, there was pushback, but then it just happened. And now you've got a day off.
But you're also hearing people having a conversation. Why do we have this day off? What is it about this holiday? And that opens up the conversation to learn more about the ancestry and the practices of the Maori ancestors.
So there's lots of elements to that step that the government took, but would that have happened under different leadership in terms of a different prime minister? I'm not sure. Possibly not, probably in my personal view. But my view is particularly she had courage to take that step. And there may be criticisms that maybe there were more steps that should have been taken, you know, whilst she had the ability to in terms of the justice system, in terms of the health and there have been a number of steps. Some people will say that they are good. Some people say they're not far enough. Some people say they're too far. So there are steps taken, but I think that one in particular is really symbolic in terms of the multiple levels of how that's going to create a positive impact in many areas, and the knowledge and acceptance of Māori traditional cultures within New Zealand.
We have a new holiday in the US. The new holiday is Juneteenth, and it celebrates when slavery being illegal was recognized in the state of Texas, but that really much cemented it being recognized throughout the country. And it's after the Emancipation Proclamation from Abraham Lincoln. It's after that, but it's like, okay, the Civil War was fought and won, but it's now recognized in Texas on June 19th and whatever. But I never heard of it before. I never heard of this day. I didn't know the significance of it up until a few years ago. And then it was made into a holiday also a few years ago. But when you were talking, what it reminded me of, so just this past June 19th, my mom, my sister, and I were in a little local restaurant, and I overheard and it was on that holiday, or it was the day after the holiday, and they were talking to each other. Oh, I never heard about this before, but now, with this holiday, I learned about it, and how wonderful, to learn about it. So there is more than just having a day off. It spreads knowledge about the cultural history and the background of it.
I'm all for that, because opening up those spaces for people to learn, because I do believe if people truly knew what happened, if people had the knowledge about the history and all, in all different places, not just New Zealand, and America and other places, Canada, Australia. Australia is going through a really interesting part at the moment where there is a referendum about recognising their Indigenous people. Different state, but when I was in Melbourne a few weeks ago, and I walked into a bookshop, and I was just amazed because there was a whole wall of Indigenous material off the back of educate, inform yourself about your vote. And look, me being the person I am, of course, I brought 2 of those books that were up there because I thought, because that really interests me. But I loved seeing, the presence. I think if things are present and they're talked about, that's how you're going to get more understanding. You're going to get more people on board. So anyway, it's an interesting space, I think.
If someone wanted to find out more about the Maori people, is there a good resource that they can go to?
I think the first place where I would suggest people to look is at the Waitangi Tribunal. The Waitangi Tribunal have produced reports on a range of things about Te Tiriti of Waitangi, historical narratives around different iwi and areas. Another place to look would be in terms of, we do have a Te Reo Māori, I guess, language commission. So there are lots of pieces of information within there about the language, and there are specific websites in terms of Matariki, our public holiday coming up for the Māori New Year. They have dedicated, the government have worked together with Māori to dedicate a website for Matariki, and that has resources on it, and they have created public resources to ensure that that knowledge moves further forward. So I guess those are my top sort of places to look at, first of all. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And I'll find the links and I'll put them on like the video and in our show notes in case people would like to find them. They can easily. So you started with, working with the iwi as kind of a in-house lawyer there, and then you went to a community law center working with it. Is that where you are now, and where you work with family and doing family law to help children?
So yeah, started off as an in-house lawyer with the iwi, spent some time at community law. That's, I guess, where my passion came out for family law, and been in the family courts, and my knowledge grew. I then have spent some time working for a private practice firm, then spent some time at the Waitangi Tribunal. And then 2 years ago, came back to Christchurch and went out on my own as an independent barrister. And I'm within a chambers here in Christchurch of other family lawyers. So that's where I guess my practice is. So within that practice though, for the last 2 years, I've been doing a lot of family law work. I have been doing some Māori land work. I have been doing some work with the Royal Commission of Inquiry into Abuse and Care that we currently have going on in New Zealand at the moment. Abuse of state care. So it's it's called the Royal Commission of Inquiry into Abuse and Care. The terms of reference for the inquiry is around children in particular who were in state care systems or faith-based care systems. Some were children, some were adults. So I've been doing a bit of work, mostly those who I have acted for or engaged with are times of when they were younger and children, and were put into state care, uplifted from their families. And of course, we have a disproportionate amount of Māori who have been uplifted from their families, put into state care, and have been victims. But now we call, they have been victims of abuse and care. I think being a barrister suits me really well at the moment because I can work in areas that I have interests in, and I'm able to have flexibility.
Now, I think most people may know the difference, but like with us, a lawyer in the US, once you're a lawyer in the US, you can do any type of law in court, outside of court, how you said you don't have to be associated with any particular court or chamber. So can you just break up, what does it mean to be a barrister and then to be in chambers?
Yeah, sure. So to be a barrister in New Zealand, so you're a barrister sole, so you work independently, so you're self-employed. For me, I can take direct instructions from clients. So I don't need a law firm to instruct me on certain matters. So in particular, I have approvals for family law, criminal law, and Māori land law to take direct instructions. However, there are occasions where law firms brief me and they instruct me to act, and they're my instructing solicitor. A lot of barristers in New Zealand, and particularly in Christchurch, we have quite a large independent bar of barristers. A lot of us are in what we call chambers. So we are all independent, but we share premises. So we share offices. What's really great about that is sometimes when you think about barristers or being independent at the bar, it can be quite lonesome. You're on your own. But in this sense, we have what we call chambers, where we have offices, individual offices in like a building. We're not connected in terms of our work, but we are connected in terms of where we, I guess, live during the day. We have the ability, law can be really taxing. We deal with some really difficult things. We deal with conflict on a daily basis. So you have that collegiality in terms of peer support. You also have the ability to talk over cases. In my chambers in particular, we don't like to have cases against each other. So that's a rule that, we have established within our, we could if we wanted to, but we try not to, just so we have the freedom to be able to talk to each other if we have something difficult that comes up.
That is nice to do that. That is nice.
Yeah, it's a really, for me at this stage in my career, it works really well. There's lots of benefits from it. And then you can just be also really social.
I worked in a firm for several years, or a couple firms for several years, and then I went out on my own. And one of the things that I went on my own, having my own law firm, my own little practice, the things that I missed was that collegial support and camaraderie, being able to walk down the hall into someone else's office. Hey, I have this issue I'm kind of struggling with. What do you think? I really missed that when I had my own firm. So it's nice that you have your own, what I would call firm, your own practice or your own business.
Yes.
But you have a collegial atmosphere as well. That's great.
Sole practitioners, that's what we would call them, which is similar to what you're saying in terms of going out on your own and having your own firm. So we have those options too. But for me, in terms of my practicing certificate, I've actively chosen to be a barrister.
Are they different certificates that you have to do the different things?
Yeah, so there are different requirements for a sole practitioner, mainly around trust accounts. Not to get too technical about it, but trust accounts and money wise, and so for example, in terms of a barrister, you invoice out and get paid after you've done the work. One of the distinctions, I guess, if you had a trust account or you had a law firm is people can put money into the trust account first of all, and then it gets drawn down, after services have been performed.
There's no difference in your certification or your qualifications as to which way you can do?
I guess in terms of our qualifications, to be a lawyer in New Zealand, you have to have an LLB, a Bachelor of Laws. You have to undertake the professionals course, and then you have to get admitted to the bar. And before you can go out on your own, whether that's a partner in a firm, you have your own practice, or you have a barrister, you have to complete a certain amount of years as a lawyer. And then you apply to the New Zealand Law Society and you tell them what you want to do. And you go through a vigorous course, interview process, references from prior employers.
How did you find collaborative law? How has that affected your practice?
Yeah, so I'm at the very start in terms of my collaborative law practice. I learned about collaborative law because we have a bit of a superstar collaborative law, I guess, enthusiast or sharer of knowledge in Christchurch, Selena Trigg. And I happened to share premises with Selena when I was going out as a barrister. So she shared with me that she was, she practiced in collaborative law. I had no idea what that was, but I saw some similarities in terms of its wraparound holistic approach to working with families, in particular with family law. In terms of Māori culture, we believe that everything's interconnected with each other. So, to be well, you need to be well within your whānau relationships, your family relationships. You need to be well in terms of your mental health. You need to be well in terms of your physical health, and then your spiritual health as well. So what I liked about collaborative law is I could see a real synergy in terms of an approach when you work with clients, not just to be solely focused on positions, not to be solely focused on, I guess, the law, without thinking about how the practice and the law and the outcome will impact people as they need to move on with their lives. So lots of times I talk to my clients about when we are in family law disputes or there's been separations, that at this point in time, you've got a lawyer and I'm walking alongside you. At some stage, I'm not going to be there. So how can we get you to a place where you are confident and comfortable once the lawyers step out of the room? And that's potentially with relationships with, your children's father or mother, relationships with your children, or what that looks like. So what I liked about it appeared to be more of a holistic approach about ensuring that the person, when they come out of this process, which is already a difficult process and a life-changing process, that they do come out strengthened, so they can move forward in their lives.
Is there a collaborative community in Christchurch or in New Zealand?
Yes, so there have been a lot of us who have undertaken the training with Selena and have become collaborative law practitioners. It's at its very early stages. I think, though, in Christchurch, we do actually work without knowing that it was collaborative with some of the principles already. It is very common for particularly when we talk about what we would call relationship property or marital
assets. Yeah.
A lot of that, particularly in our area, wouldn't necessarily go to court. Our court's majority work down here is along those care and protection, care of children matters, or family harm. So a lot of us, in terms of lawyers in the relationship property part, do pick up the phone, do try and negotiate a lot with our clients to save them the grief and cost and stress of litigating over assets. So I think, in particular, Christchurch, I can't say that that's the same for other parts of New Zealand, but our community down here of practitioners, I think, lean towards more of a collaborative working way than straight litigation. So we do have that. We are growing the group down here in terms of those who are qualified, and I have to acknowledge Selena and I've said her name probably 3 times already, but it's because of her passion and drive in this space that many of us have learned about collaborative and have become collaboratively trained. I guess challenge for the next steps are to have that more available for our clients, and ensuring that then the community knows what collaborative law is. So, the first step of getting the practitioners together, whether that's lawyers or, financial neutrals or mental health specialists, whatever that may be, getting, a group going and getting some momentum going in that space. And then the next stage will be, how then do we educate communities and that practice is readily available. So we are getting there, but I do like the essence of it in terms of it is a different approach, and we want families to be able to come out of what is a really changing and stressful time for them, usually, to be able to move forward and get on with their lives.
Yeah, and I liked how you said it, to help them get into a space as well as have maybe some of the skills to be able to have their post-marriage relationship for themselves, and if they have kids, for their kids, without the lawyers being there. Because you said someday the lawyers aren't going to be there, so how are you going to carry that on forward? That's a really good description of it, giving them a good foundation to help do that.
Yes.
And a lot of principles of, collaborative law, we include it as our, we see it as an integrative law approach. It's just one way to be an integrative lawyer. What does being an integrative lawyer mean to you?
I think it's having a really open mind and using skill sets from all different spaces to suit the needs of your clients that you work with and for. So from my perspective, when I'm working with Māori and their families, or if it's individuals, an integrated approach to me is adapting my approach that they can understand, that elevates, I guess, their values and their spaces, and ensure that by using, while we're on this journey in terms of the legislation or legal processes that we have to follow, that they feel comfortable and supported in a way that is of value to them while in those spaces. And it's not just like for them. I think I have to be honest, it probably only dawned on me this week, I have quite a diverse client base in terms of different cultures that I act for, and my practice adapts depending on my client, and bringing in whatever I need to bring in to ensure that the client understands things, feels supported, but I also understand what's important for them. So I think there's such an opportunity when you integrate all sorts of things, but it's more about an open mind, and also being really or acknowledging that you yourself as the lawyer don't have all the answers. You may not have all the knowledge, but you recognize when you don't have that knowledge and you seek out more knowledge, or you have support or you bring in others that can bring that knowledge in to help your client. So you shouldn't be an expert of everything. You can't be an expert of everything, but you can be an expert in acknowledging what you don't know and who you should bring in to get the best outcome.
And it goes back to what we were talking about before, about knowledge, as the importance of having knowledge and the importance of knowing when there are gaps in your knowledge, and to realize if there's a gap in my knowledge, doesn't mean I'm less of a lawyer, doesn't mean I'm less of an advocate for my clients. It means here I recognize the gap, and now I can go out to find different disciplines or different professionals who can help fill the knowledge and to help fill that gap. I think, yeah, that's wonderful.
My knowledge, obviously, I'm at the start of my collaborative law practice and journey, and I can already see the ability for collaborative law, as well as, just being really open about practices to address some of our inequities that we have in terms of access to justice. And I know that there are those who are more experienced in collaborative practice that are already on that journey. So I'm really looking forward to learning more about that. I'm also interested, and probably there's even a work piece around it of gathering together all of those collaborative practitioners or collaborative lawyers of who have Indigenous links, and talking to them about how that looks in their space, and just sharing knowledge, and just literally getting together for the first stage. So I mean, that's something that I'd love to see.
Have you contacted IACP?
Not directly on that. Selena and I have had conversations, because she's just been elected, I think, as the incoming president of the next year.
Congratulations to her. And I think that's a great idea of yours, to like a committee or a subcommittee or something.
Just be good to know. I tried when I went to Forum for the first time. I was really lucky. I got supported by the Boren Foundation over here to learn more about collaborative. And when I went to Forum, I sort of had my eyes peeled, I guess, for those. And I did come across a couple of people that were at Forum who said to me after we had spoken, or oh, I am of this descent, or I have links here. So and just being fresh as well, you don't want to I was just literally lapping everything up, but it would be, I think that would be an interesting piece for ISEP in the future. Even at Forum, I'm not sure if I'll get there. I hope I can get there. It's just a long way away from New Zealand.
I have never been to New Zealand. I've been to Australia though, and it's a long way in terms of flying, but the time difference just makes you, when you're there, you just seem so separated from your life, wherever your life may be.
Yes, yeah. And running a practice when you're, on your own as well, you have to manage that. So, but it would be in the future, it would be so great, even just for those who are comfortable and interested, even if we just literally shared contact details and had a Zoom or something, even just to connect. It'd just be fascinating to know who's out there.
If any collaborative lawyer out there practices Indigenous law, please contact Jamie Lee and see if you can coordinate a time to get together and bring together other Indigenous law practitioners. A lot of times we think of collaborative law as family law. Or being used for family law, but really it is a paradigm shift. It's a way of thinking. It's a way of practice that could be used in other areas of law, and how anytime there's disputes involving different segments of a population, if there's a way for collaborative law or collaborative principles to help meander that conflict. If you saw it in the space of disputes between the rights of any marginalized group and the majority group at that time, to use collaborative principles to have those conversations with each other or to resolve those types of conflicts within the community.
Depending where the communities were, there would be adapted approaches. Like I could see within New Zealand that we could approach, I do think there's room for us to be able to look at how to incorporate tikanga Māori or Māori values and dispute resolution from a Māori perspective, because there are ways in which it's the preference, I guess, in terms of dispute resolution from Māori culture perspective, alongside collaborative or whatever that looks like. So I do think, in different spaces, there's the ability to adapt and support each other, to be able to support others. So I think the one thing is, even with collaborative, to not be, I guess, stuck in a one-way, part. It's always been open to how can a collaborative process be enhanced to meet the needs of your clients, whatever that is, and just been open to doing it.
The first season of this series, we interviewed Stu Webb, and that's one of the things that he talked about, is that some collaborative practice groups get so focused on, we must practice this way, this way, this way. And he was saying, no, the collaborative practice is more of a mindset. It's more of a shift in the way that we approach it, not so necessarily as we have to do it, steps 1, 2, 3. It's the mindset that we could use it and look at what our client needs at the time to see what that mindset is, and have that shift in our hearts and our minds as we are the lawyer in those different situations.
I think one of the things that I always have in the back of my mind too is just making it accessible, because a lot of my practice has been to try and assist those who cannot access resources or lawyers. And there are, economic disparities. So how can we, in our different spaces, in our different countries, be able to develop a collaborative way of working for all clients, whether they have assets or not, and what can we do? And look, I think many of us, particularly I think those who work in family law and have worked in care and protection spaces and with children, is that there is a real need to ensure that it's accessible. It's not seen to be something that if you have money, you can access, because probably some of the best work is yet to come, but also some of the best work will be with those who do not have the resources to have the ability to instruct a lawyer and on their own accord.
Well, thank you so much for being part of Integrative Lawyers of the World. I really enjoy this opportunity to get to meet with you, and we're so honored that you are part of the Integrative Lawyers of the World podcast.
Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of it.